Tennessee rated as number 8 in the overall ESPN quarterback poll. And this is from Adam Rittenberg, who I worked with at one point. I think Adam does a fantastic job. For those of you that thinks it might have some sort of agenda, he covers the Big Ten a lot, but I've never seen any sort of agenda out of him. So your initial thoughts on Tennessee being 8th in the ESPN quarterback poll before I give you a little bit of a breakdown as to why they're 8th, Caleb?
I think this is sacrificing quality for quantity. I think there is this idea that Joe Milton's a senior, and after that, all they have is Nico on the roster, so he couldn't bring himself to put them any higher. I don't think that's right because, one, he gave point. You could tell his criteria was quality of quarterbacks, returning starters, and quantity. He put all those 3 things in there. And Tennessee lost points for not having quantity because they only have 2, but they also lost points for not having a returning starter. But Joe Milton is more experienced than any other team without a return, any other quarterback that's not a returning starter on this list. I mean, he started 4 games so far for Tennessee, and he also started a lot for Michigan in the past. So I'm not buying that. And I think the thing that sticks out to me the most that I think was just annoying to look at was Alabama at number 5. Like, you can believe in Ty Simpson all day, but the only guy that's back for Alabama right now that we've seen play is Jalen Milroe, and he's awful. I mean, he's legitimately horrible. They shouldn't be in the top 10.
And as you mentioned, there's no track record with Simpson. So to go through this list, USC, Southern California, I mean, you can't argue with that. They've got Caleb Williams, the Heisman Trophy winner. So, I mean, I see that. It doesn't really matter who's second. And then Ohio State comes in at second. And this is without C.J. Stroud. Now, this is where knowing the Big Ten might affect somewhat your judgment if you're Adam. And because he knows who the backup quarterback situation is going to be. And we'll see if they go recruiting or the portal. Kyle McCord is likely to start. He's ESPN's number 31 overall prospect in 2021. We'll see. Ryan Day also brought in a Devin Brown, who was a top 100 prospect in 2022 class. But to me, not only this, but also, Caleb, having seen Joe Milton in Michigan, maybe this affects Adam's ranking a little bit because 2 and 8 are pretty far apart for both teams that are replacing an award-winning quarterback.
Possible, but I think any quarterback playing under Jim Harbaugh is going to be different than a quarterback playing under Josh Heupel.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, that's not even a knock on Jim Harbaugh or on his style. It's Harbaugh is somewhat, in a different way, can be a quarterback whisperer because he develops quarterbacks for the NFL. But in terms of scheming, I mean, oh my gosh, like you would much rather be playing for Josh Heupel in college. And so
I agree.
Not even close.
So I think you could make a strong argument that you would take Nico and Joe over whoever Ohio State puts out there, and they seem to be a little bit uncertain. So let's go through the rest of the list, Caleb, if you can run me down 3 through 7. And I'll just give you my honest take. Would I take Nico or Joe? So who's at number 3?
All right, so at number 3, we got Oklahoma. And the reason they're number 3 is because of returning starter Dylan Gabriel. But they were awful last year. So I think that's ridiculously high.
I will tell you, completely objective. I have no dog in the fight. I would take Tennessee's duo over Oklahoma's. All right, who's 4?
4th is Georgia, which is kind of like, look, we have our issues with Stetson Bennett and his behavior and his personality, but this is still, it seems to be undervaluing Stetson Bennett. It seems like, oh, it's not a big deal that he's gone. And I don't get that.
Well, and let's remember, Stetson Bennett was very good throughout the game, but an absolute dog in the fourth quarter. If you can dislike Stetson Bennett all you want, but what he did in the fourth quarter was nothing short of phenomenal. So I have trouble buying that one either. Again, like, as you pointed out, Joe, you have some experience, and Nico, you have tremendous upside. So who is next? So I would take Tennessee for the record.
Yeah. So after Georgia was Alabama, I think we broke them down pretty well because, again, Ty Simpson is no known commodity. Jalen Milroe is not only is he a known commodity, he's known awful. Like he's bad. He should be a negative for you. And so
yeah, he's not a good cat.
Yeah. Apologies to Jalen. I have no idea about his character. I'm sure he's a really nice guy.
Sure, he's a fantastic individual.
Yeah, just can't play quarterback in the SEC. Sorry.
Yeah, he was out alongside John Calipari, washing the feet of some third world country that suffered a earthquake years ago. He's a great guy.
Yes, very, 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 very nice guy. Number 6 is Michigan. They do return JJ McCarthy, but I mean, it's not about the quarterback at Michigan. That's what's throwing me off for them to be number 6.
Okay, but I would take JJ McCarthy. I would take the given. I can see that argument. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
I can see that argument. Could Joe Milton accuracy issues crop up again and Nico not be ready? Yes, I could see that being a possibility. Whereas I think Michigan, they're not going to have a prolific quarterback, but they'll have a solid quarterback. If that's a good way to put it. So who else is in front of Tennessee?
And the one that's in front that honestly they are in very similar situations is Texas. Which is Texas has Quinn Ewers, which is their Joe Milton, and then they also have Arch Manning, which is their Nico Iamaleava. And I think of the two, you'd rather be Tennessee because I watched enough Quinn Ewers last year. Am I pronouncing his name right? I'm sorry.
Yes, you are. Quinn Ewers.
Okay. I watched enough of him last year. I saw enough of him. I don't believe in him. I think that Arch Manning is good. This is why I said I think Arch Manning probably starts before Nico because
But see, here's my argument. And again, people in the message board are going to get upset that I'm anti-Joe. If I'm basing this off the complete volume of work, the Orange Bowl is a part of that. It's not the only thing. So when I base it off that, I've seen accuracy issues. December the 31st, everybody would have agreed with me. He had a great game in the Orange Bowl. I think teams are going to defend him a little bit different. They did Hendon Hooker. I think they're going to defend over the middle and the slants and the digs and all those sorts of things because he's more accurate on intermediate passes. But this offense does not click if they're not hitting, I think you picked the number out, 3 deep balls a game. It's just not. So that is why I still have questions about Joe Milton because I can tell you within a month that you're going to see defenses rock up and make him hit the deep ball, and they're going to play the intermediate routes. And that's where I think we'll really see what Joe Milton is.
All right, let's take this let's break this down a little bit because I think that Milton is better than we're giving him credit for on hitting the deep ball now because we watched him. We watched him in mop. Yes, I think he's much better than he was in 2021. We watched him.
I don't know.
We watched him last year in mop-up duty, and he hit Squirrel White quite a few times for a few deep balls, and I think he hit Jimmy Holiday one time for a deep ball. Now, again, that was in mop-up duty. That was against the other team's backups. But I think we're overrating on it being against the backups because when you're having trouble on it, in Josh Heupel's offense, the receiver's getting open no matter what. So the question is just, can you or can you not hit the deep ball? It has nothing to do with the other team's defense whatsoever. I don't think that matters at all. And I think that we saw him hitting it last year. And in the Clemson game, they did lull to sleep one point, and he hit Squirrel White for a beautiful deep pass that got down to the 1-yard line. I think Milton, I actually think the opposite's going to happen. I think they're going to play him the way Clemson played him last year. I do. And the reason I think that is the problem is his accuracy is still not great. So once he gets into the 30, 35 yard line mark to try to score, it's a little bit more difficult for him to throw the ball. And if you notice, there were a lot of drives that Tennessee couldn't finish in that game against Clemson. We forget that because there were a few times they scored. I thought more than anything, their defense played well, and they snuffed out a few attempted trick plays by Clemson, that notable fake field goal that they did. I think this year what you're going to see is a lot of let you get your yards between the 20s. There's going to be a lot of letting Tennessee get their yards between the 20s or between the 30s. And I think it might be tough for Milton to – I think the question for Milton is once you get to like the 30-yard line, okay, can he – and the defense is tightened up. There's no deep ball at that point. So can he – and so all you have to do is guard the middle, and can he then make some passes to convert for a touchdown? That's going to be the difficult part. I
like him in the red zone because of his arm strength. I I don't think it's going to be really difficult to pick balls off when they're coming to about 110 miles an hour. I think there's a very distinct possibility for those, again, that say I'm anti-Joe, a very, very distinct possibility and a real possibility that it turns out that Josh Heupel is a great quarterbacks coach in terms of specifically coaching how to throw the deep ball. Because Hendon Hooker went from, I thought, an average deep ball thrower in 2021 to throwing one of the best deep balls that I have ever seen in 2022. By the end of the year, he was right up there with the best I've ever seen. And Chris Landry, who we've had on, who is a scout and been an assistant coach in college, he said the same thing. So I think there's a really good chance. And the footwork's simplified. I understand that. But I think there's a good chance that Josh Heupel is such a great quarterback coach that he simplifies things, and Joe Milton will turn into a great deep ball thrower. If that's the case, my prediction of Nico in October is completely off and stupid in retrospect. But I think there's a real possibility of that.
I'm with you. I think that's what's going to happen. I think the question becomes, I wonder if the clock's reset on playing Tennessee in general. I wonder if the clock's reset forget whether or not it's Joe or Nico or Hendon. Do you play the style that Clemson played against Tennessee last year, where you leave things open over the middle and play as soft coverage as possible? Now, I know they can run the ball. I understand Tennessee can run it down your throat if you do that, so you got to make sure you have a good enough defensive line and linebackers that can fill the gaps. But, bring 5 guys, play everybody else soft, let Tennessee get their yards between the 30s, and then comes the question, could Tennessee all of a sudden have a bad red zone offense? I don't mean turn the ball over, but would they be forced to kick a lot of field goals? And look, this was a thing with Steve Spurrier back in the day. Like you've talked about, John Chavis said he knew Spurrier was too pass happy. There became a philosophy of let Florida get their yards, because once they get close to the red zone, they're not going to be able to spread the field as much, and they're not going to be able to score as easily. And there were a lot of games. That last home game with Spurrier at Florida, Tennessee beat him because Florida had to kick a lot of field goals.
Yep. I'm not worried about that at all, though, with Josh Heupel. I think he does value running the football. Now, could they, if the only way you're going to beat Tennessee along those lines of what you laid out there is that you're going to have to give up some yards, and you're going to have to bone up and be tougher in the red zone. I think that's the only possible solution for the coming years. But I don't think Josh Heupel will get away from running the football. I don't think that'll be the case. But we shall see. Everybody gets figured out at some point. I just think Tennessee's offense is at least 3 or 4 years down the line before getting figured out. So, prediction for the game: Madison Square Garden, Tennessee, FAU. It is officially the Kiffin Classic in the Big Apple. He didn't respond to my tweet, by the way. It's frustrating. Smoky Mountain Red said everyone but Tennessee and Tennessee fans doesn't realize how much we ran the ball this past year. Well, there's some truth to that. All right. So
before we get there, it's not all just about running when you get inside the 30. You actually have to be successful in the intermediate passing game when passes are a lot more covered. There's a lot more coverage in the intermediate passing game inside the 30-yard line too. And I'm not saying the red zone. I'm not saying 20. I'm saying once you hit the 30, you have to be able to do that. So
you're expanding the red zone. Is that a new orange zone we have?
I say the 30 because the deep balls for Tennessee all go about 45 yards in the air. So there's no deep ball advantage once you hit the 30-yard line. And so that's why I say, I guess I could say red zone to be easier. But yeah, I think the intermediate passing game, it's not just having to run the ball. The intermediate passing game is much better covered once you get in the red zone.